Hey guys, I'm talking about racial reconciliation and Christians. How should Christians view what's going on right now in our country? Last time I talked about five things I'm not saying with this video series, and I'm going to recap those real quick. I'm not saying you're a racist or your church is. I'm not saying America's a racist nation. I'm not saying that salvation is the same thing as liberation and racial reconciliation. I'm just saying that if you don't have reconciliation yet, the gospel isn't done with you. Okay. Number four, I'm not saying the political left is correct. And I'm not saying, number five, that I am anti-police. Okay. So those are five things I'm not saying. And let me tell you today, six things that I am saying. All right. So six things that I am saying. Number one, I am saying that America has a bad record on race with both natives and African Americans. We do. Now, I realize that we, in some ways, just followed the worldliness of the world and the culture that we lived in at that time. Race and slavery. Slavery has always been a perennial, horrific issue. The last letter John Wesley wrote was to William Wilberforce, who was the campaigner to abolish the slave trade in Britain. And Wesley wrote in a letter to encourage him to continue on. And that's part of our history, part of our Methodist forebears, because they cared about that kind of stuff. But America, broadly speaking, has a bad record on this issue. I would encourage you to read about it if you have not known. So 99 years ago yesterday was the Tulsa race riots. It was actually a two-day event, so yesterday and the day before. The Tulsa race riots was a time where a black man was falsely accused, was tried to be protected by a small group of black men because a local newspaper began calling for his lynching publicly. And a scuffle ensued as they were standing around the courthouse to try to keep him from being lynched. One of the guns went off. The different people disagree on exactly how it happened and all of that. But after that, the black part of town of Tulsa was burned to the ground. There were white men and women who went into black homes, took them out. Hundreds of blacks were kept outside, under guard outside that part of town. They burned it to the ground. 100 to 300 people, depending on who you ask, lost their lives in that riot. And the looting that took place of those people's houses, white women go in and gather up all of their silverware and take it out in a wagon and take it home. That kind of thing. There's a lot of eyewitness accounts and things like that, but it was something I never heard of until a couple of years ago. I didn't know about it, and it existed, and that happened 99 years ago. But even more than that, the American church doesn't have that good of a record. While I'm grateful that my denomination, the Bible Methodist Connection of churches, I'm grateful that we have a background in Wesleyan Methodism. The Wesleyan Methodists left the American Methodist Episcopal Church in the South in 1842, 20 years before the Civil War, over the slavery issue. And I'm grateful for that. I think it's something to be justly, rightly thankful for and proud of. However, it was not that long ago. That there were a lot of unchristian attitudes toward African Americans, teaching that they inherited the curse of Ham, and that's why they're black. And there's other, which is not true, by the way. Additionally, there's there are plenty of examples of teaching and preaching that sort of those kinds of doctrines. There were people who taught that black people did not have souls. There was significant argues up into the late 90s, early 2000s, significant argues and public debates about whether or not the Confederate church was actually correct. The Confederate states were actually right in defending slavery as an institution and fighting for the right to continue that institution. So those kinds of things we don't have. And by the way, that debate was in the Presbyterian Church. Public Presbyterian ministers holding debates on C-SPAN. You can go look it up and watch the debate if you like. So that we don't have, as an American church, we don't have that good of a record, and I think that's important to understand. I'm saying that we don't have that good of a record. Number two, I'm saying that Christians should care about racial reconciliation and unity. I'm going to talk more in the next few videos about why that is, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but Christians should care about racial reconciliation and unity, if for no other reason than Christ prayed that his church would be one as he and the Father were one. That is a striking amount of unity. They are of one substance, right? While they are different in role and things like that, they are of one substance, and there is no gap between the will of the Father and the will of the Son and the opinions of the Father and the opinions of the Son. There's no gap at all. There's a striking amount of unity, and we should strive. We should care about racial reconciliation and unity. Number three means we should care about issues that the black church cares about. All right, I'm speaking as a person from a predominantly white spirit evangelical movement, and I'm saying that what I am saying is that we should care about the issues that the black church cares about. We should care about them. Now, should they care about ones that we care about? Of course that's true. But if I was counseling you and another person in your marriage, I would tell you, you start caring, and don't worry about whether they care. You give 100% of your care about that to them, and if they'll do the same for you, we'll come together, and you'll find agreement, because a good marriage is not 50-50, it's 100-100, right? So we should care about the issues that the black church cares about if we want to see that kind of racial reconciliation, which means, number four, that we should walk with them and talk with them. We should listen to the voices that they speak with. We should listen to the issues they say they care about. We should listen to what they have to say. And I understand that in that world, not all voices are equal. Okay, I understand that is true, that not all voices are to be equally valued, just like in any church or the white evangelical movement. Not all voices are equal. Mine should probably be smaller than some people's. So just like that is true, I'm aware that not every voice is equally valid or equally what, but we should listen. We should care. We should walk with them and talk with them and listen to what they have to say. Number five, which means that we should be willing to bear discomfort for their sakes. Okay, we should be willing to bear discomfort for their sake. This has been probably the most mentally discomforting 3 weeks I've experienced in a long time, because it has required me to think and question and listen to my own assumptions and push on them and see if they are correct, and listen to an opinion that contradicts my experience and contradicts my assumption, and try to say, is there any way to bring these two together? Is that even possible? And listen to them and examine and hear their stories and try to understand what's going on there. Let me give you a quick example or analogy from our life. My wife is a very different person from me. She is. She has her own thoughts, her own weaknesses, her own strengths, her own abilities, her own gifts, her own opinions, and her own experiences. Mine are not like hers in a lot of different ways. For one thing, I'm a guy with a side of guy, and she's not. And she's a female, a beautiful, wonderful person that God has called me to bear the discomfort of thinking like her and understanding why she thinks the way she does. And that means that a lot of really uncomfortable conversations have had to be had. My wife and I went to marriage counseling, not because we were about to divorce, that's never going to happen. But we both looked at each other and said, you know what, we have these several issues on which we have a hard time coming to an agreement, and they continually crop up. They crop up in cycles. And we are either going to be happily married or unhappily married. So we're going to be married, like that's going to happen. So let us take the investment in being happily married, and let's bear the discomfort. So consequently, I sit down across the table from a man I've never met before and listen to him talk about reconciling with my wife and about finding agreement on some of these issues. And I had to bear some uncomfortable, difficult conversations during that time. And since then, of course, too. But very challenging. It's hard. It's heavy mental lifting to think in somebody else's mind and bear the discomfort of a change of my mind. We got to be willing to bear discomfort for their sakes and hear what they have to say. And sometimes that's the most Christian thing in this situation you can do. Some people say, what can I do? Well, that's the first thing is a change that happens in here that enables you to go toward that person and say, okay, I'm willing to bear the discomfort of hearing a story that maybe contradicts mine and my experience. Number 6, which sounds a lot like the way Jesus said he wants us to live. Okay. Ultimately, what I'm saying is that I think that pathway is pleasing to the Lord who created all people, that it is honoring to him, and that it gives joy to his heart. And that's what I want. Like, I want you and me, and I want his church, and I want the white evangelical movement and the black evangelical movement. I want us to bring joy to the heart of our Lord when he looks at us. And I think if we will pursue these things, that's ultimately the goal that we have, is to please the Lord by being one, by being unable to be divided, and by having a higher unity that calls us together than the ones that push us apart. And that's what I want to see happen. And so I just encourage you to continue on this little journey. I'm going to talk next about several biblical ways in which we should think about race in America as Christians, as believers. So talk to you then.